Uh, welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I'm your host, Michael. After a 2 week hiatus, we're back. Joining me this week, as usual, Gail from Communities Digital News, Daniel from the Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
Hey, we're here to prove that college basketball is not the only game in town tonight. Got
Oh,
plenty of
absolutely, absolutely.
boxing degenerates. We're here for you.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to catch up on. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, and website discussing all things boxing. The motto is: when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get talked about. If you want to check out all information regarding the show, regarding the podcast, you can go to the official site, p4pboxingreport.com. Let me repeat that, p4pboxingreport.com. If you float around the page, particularly on the bottom portion of the page, you will find links where to follow us all over social media, the links for the Facebook page, the YouTube page, the Twitter page, where you can donate. We got a Cash Me and PayPal donation links. Let donation be the best nation. If you still got a little bit of stimulus money held over, or if you got your tax refund, if you got a little bit held over yet from that, please shoot some coins to Pound for Pound Box Report. Also, links to follow us on any RSS feed podcast link. We're on iTunes. We're on Spotify. We're on Google Podcasts. We're just about everywhere where you'll find a podcast. Please follow us on iTunes. Please follow us on Spotify and whatnot. Please leave a review as well. iTunes 5-star review on iTunes. You will get read throughout the show. And last but certainly not least, you check out the bottom portion of Pound for Pound Box Report. The website, you can find the links to my online coaching page. I am an online coach for beachbody.com. If you're interested in getting your body right, or if you want to take your fitness game up to the next level, please check me out, my coaching page, my Let's Build Together fitness group challenge. And also, if you want to email Pound for Pound Box Report, the email address is p4pboxingreport, p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. And repeat that. If you want to shoot us an email, p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport. Love to hear from you. Love to hear your questions. What's good about the show? Even what's bad about the show? What can we improve on? Let's get things going. Want to go back. We're going to go cover 2 weeks worth of boxing since we were off last week. Let's start with the most recent bouts, and let's start over in Dubai. Card that was aired on ESPN Plus. The headline of that card was Jamel Herring, a WBO junior lightweight champion. He was defending the belt against former 122 and 126 pound champion Carl Frampton. Herring stopped him in 6 rounds. After a bit of a slow start, first 3 rounds, Herring really got warmed up. It really showed his dominance. Knocked him down twice. That uppercut in the 6th round, I believe it was, that was a signal. Frampton kind of froze, and then finally went down, and then he finished him off. Frampton retired after the bout. I would argue, Gail, that putting everything together, given the opponent and given what was at stake, Herring really stepped his game up. He showed improved, dare I say, the best performance of his career.
I would absolutely call it the best performance of his career. And it was after on again, off again, on again, off again. He was to be the first championship defense during the COVID situation, and then got delayed, got popped for COVID himself, which I think in retrospect explains a lot of what we saw in the Okendo fight, which he now owns up to, that it hit him a little harder than he thought. Then Frampton, has a hand injury, and it just was seemingly a snake bit fight. It finally gets moved to the Middle East from Belfast, where it would have taken place, except that the pandemic roared back and made that impossible. And so they were in an odd little pop-up dome facility, no spectators other than some VIP guests, which made it possible for those of us watching back here in the States and in the UK for that matter, to hear Well, Brian Bomac McIntyre at full throttle, full voice for 6 full rounds. And in the other corner, Jamie Moore, Frampton's trainer, at full throttle, full voice for 6 rounds, yelling at their guys to perform. And in the first half of the 6-round fight, first 3 rounds, Frampton was trying to get business done at distance. Herring had an enormous height and reach advantage on Frampton. And boy, once they got in the ring, first of all, how the hell Herring makes 130 at age 35 at 5'10"? Only a Marine could do it. I'm just saying. He was every bit a welterweight in that ring on Saturday. Be that as it may, he made the weight. It wasn't an IBF 10-pound rehydration weight limit, so there it is. So Frampton tried to box him around the outside. Well, Herring could have won a fight like that, with ease, and he was winning all those early rounds. So Frampton and his trainer, realized they were going to have to try to go in at him, go inside, see if they could hurt him. And that's where Herring really started to shine. He has transformed himself into a completely different fighter at this point of his career. Credit to Brian McIntyre, credit to Terence Crawford, who's his training mate, and everybody in that stable at Team Crawford, Team Bomac. And credit to Herring. He's never been that much of a power puncher. He's only got, I don't think he even has a 50% knockout ratio. Man, he was in there like a blasting, banging away machine against Frampton. Once he realized Frampton wasn't really going to hurt him, he got popped a few times, weathered it just fine. He did get cut again. This time he really ignored it. He shook it off. He stepped on the gas. And boy, did he deliver some impressive left hooks, straight lefts, excellent body shots. But you're right, it was the uppercut that did Frampton in. And it was almost like a body shot hitting Frampton in that there was that odd delayed reaction. Kind of stood there and suddenly topped over like a Weeble or something. It was just odd. He survived the round. He got back in there for the next round. He was in trouble. He had never really recovered. He got hit again, got up again, and trainer Jamie Moore wisely threw in the towel on Frampton, giving Herring a really tremendous 6th round TKO win. Answered a lot of the doubters. Timothy Bradley on the call for ESPN was once again all up Herring's backside over that last fight. Well, I'm sure Herring takes great satisfaction in shutting up Tim Bradley and setting himself up for a unification fight, potentially, with Oscar Valdez, or perhaps a fight with Shakur Stevenson, who is in theory his mandatory. Either one of them is a great matchup, a big payday for Herring no matter what happens. Before this fight, I would have said, Valdez and even Stevenson are probably pretty strong favorites. Now, I think that's a little more competitive fight than we would have guessed, and we're in for a treat either way as fans.
I titled this particular episode, What Direction Should Herring Go? We're going to touch on that in a bit in terms of his future. I'll go to you, Daniel. To Gail's point, I'll just make some disclosure here, myself, Gail, we've had conversations with Herring privately and his team, if you will. And excuse me, Herring, as well as his people, have talked about the Okendo fight and how he was still dealing with the effects recovering from COVID. You saw what Herring looks like completely healthy against Frampton. Was this the case all along that when Herring is right, he was just too big, too long, and too strong for the smaller Frampton?
It's a combination of that. The fact that Frampton was already talking retirement prior to fighting, and we kind of know the adage, if you're already talking about retirement, you're essentially retired in a way. And it was a matter of probably Frampton's camp and I know we're going to talk about this in another fight that we missed last week, but hoping that maybe the COVID lag of coming back from having COVID could translate to another fight. And they did try to say certain things, like Dave Franklin's camp tried to say that Herring made a mistake not coming to Dubai as early as they did. Little did they, I guess, either they didn't research or didn't bother to care that the last time that Jamel Herring was actually in that part of the world, he was an electrician in the Marines, carrying gear that probably you wouldn't be able to carry in a bag, like for training now. So there's a lot of underestimating, and from the get-go, you could tell that Herring was gonna have it easy, like as far as fighting the distance, make sure he keeps it in there. And when Frampton got in there, just making sure that he didn't land enough. The only time that there was a little bit of worry was when he got that cut. Because in the area where it could bother him. That would have been Frampton's best chance at a target. But once the first knockdown happened, that erased all doubts. And then the second knockdown, corner did the right thing as far as making sure that it couldn't go any longer. It was just a case of, unfortunately, Frampton's best weight was 122. Featherweight's putting it in the stretch. He needed a dance partner like Leo Santa Cruz that could fight to his strengths and make it a good fight. 130 was just too much. And hopefully he'll be able to take his career, look at it, sit back and be able to just relax on it, because trying to fight again at this weight with carrying this determined, because think about all the pent-up frustration of having to fight delayed again and having to fight delayed again, and then now be able to come back and shut a lot of people up. We have to admit, a lot of people really do dismiss Herring in a lot of ways, like because you can try to say he's the weakest of the champions of 130, but the way he handled Frampton should be able to tell you that it's not going to be an easy road, whether it's Shakur or whether it's Valdez, whichever one that they take. Herring's going to be a very interesting fighter coming in, and he's also a man that probably is not going to stay too long in the fight game as well. He kind of knows that you better leave with your head on straight.
And let's indeed. Yeah, to Gail's point, he is 30. He is 35. He doesn't have like wear and tear in terms of in the ring, but he's still 35. You have to put that into consideration, and not just because of the age. I just don't think that. I think that he wants to get in, do what he has to do, make his money, and then retire and with his bearings, and spend a happy life with his family. You know, I mentioned how we were privy to some private conversations with Jamal and his team. Let's talk future here. Bit of inside baseball. We had heard even before this fight that if Herring were to win, they were going to try to go for a unification bout with a WBC champion, Oscar Valdez. Valdez, of course, earlier, just a month or so ago, knocked out Burchell to win that WBC belt. But there's also mandatory challenger Shakur Stevenson, who has a fight coming up, I want to say in June, and the WBO has given Herring a 30-day window to make a decision in terms of that mandatory, in terms of the winner of that Shakur bout in June. I think it's June the 12th. Herring, after the bout, said he wants a unification bout, right? The manager of Valdez went to Twitter and basically added Herring and said, "What say you about a unification bout?" On the meme, at the same time, Shakur was like, "No. I want my shot." because the WBO has put out this mandate, if you will, where do you think Herring will go? Do you think he will go with Valdez? If he does, he risks being stripped. Do you think he will fall back and eventually face the mandatory Shakur? Or will folks behind the scenes kind of finagle their way into a fight with Valdez, Shakur fighting the winner? And the interesting thing is, Stevenson is ranked number one both by the WBO and the WBC. So he's basically almost guaranteed a shot no matter what.
Oh, come on. Who are we kidding? The WBO would love to see 2 guaranteed fights set up rather than 1. So there's going to be, it's all about the money. It's all about the money for Herring. He should try to get the biggest money fight he can because both fights are dangerous. And this should be a good payday for him either way. I do think the payday is bigger with Valdez. The prestige is a little bigger with Valdez, especially given his performance against Burchell. And there's something to be said for going after Valdez after that tough fight he had with Burchell, and to see what perhaps it took out of him. Who knows? I do think some discussions will be had behind the scenes. Let's see what the Top Rank Brain Trust can do with the WBO. If they put together the guarantee that, there's a unification fight, which personally I say when there's a unification on the table, that's the one you take. That's the one that's better for boxing. Shakur can wait his turn. He's saying the right things. He should sound aggressive and sound interested. But in the end, if he can sit back and wait for the winner, that's a bigger money fight for him. This is, they're both Valdez and Shakur in the Top Rank family. Herring, it's all the Top Rank family. So this is not going to be a promotional issue either way. Top Rank wins no matter what they set up, but it really does make more sense to unify. And then you have the young challenger going against a unified champion, either Valdez or Herring. That's a winner for everybody. Truly, I think that's the right way to go. I don't think there's a wrong way to go as long as these fights get made. And it really is in Herring's best interest as the swing guy of this trio to go where he gets the best offer, because he's ending his career. At this point, it's mostly about the money, because both of those fights, he will be the underdog, although not as much as it probably would have been a week ago if we had speculated about what was going to happen. Even assuming he wins, we didn't think he'd win in quite that spectacular of a fashion. So we're in for a treat no matter what happens.
Unification bout with Valdez, mandatory obligation with Stevenson. Daniel, where do you think Herring will go?
You got to go where the money is. Like you mentioned, we've had private discussions, and we know what the goal is. Like we know what the goal is. It's unification. He's made it pretty much well known. He wants to have that in his resume. And like Gail mentioned, this is all in-house. It doesn't matter what fight gets made, Bob Arum wins. And let's not forget the WBO does have that infamous second acronym of we're Bob's organization. So they'll find a way to work it out, because like you mentioned, when it comes to the rankings, no matter what they do, Shakur's going to get a shot. Whether it's going to be against Herring or it's going to be against Valdez, he's going to get a shot. The main thing, though, is try to get as much money as you can. You're not going to be favored in either one of the fights. And for Top Rank, it probably would make more sense, just as a storyline perspective, the way they build Olympians, to have Herring fight Valdez. Because then you can have, like I said, the story of the American Marine fighting this Mexican Olympian who's battled this way back into contention after not looking so good in this last few fights. until we got that knockout with Berchelt. And then coming in, like I said, then you have, if Valdez wins, then you have the situation of Mexican Olympian versus American Olympian. So that'll sell by itself. And if Herring wins, you still have an All-American bout. It's pretty much New Jersey versus Long Island. So that's going to be a very interesting situation, but they should go for what the money is. The money right now is probably with Valdez. It makes sense. WBO has to do what they have to do. They can't really just stay quiet and say, like, okay, we're just going to allow you to do what you need to do. They have to act. They're enforcing mandatory, but we already know what's going to happen. They're going to find a way. Some money's going to change hands, and they'll have the unification fight. I could probably say like in the fall. And considering how opening things up and some other things that may be coming up, you might see that on Long Island.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what Team Herring decides to do next. I pretty much agree with both of you that they will shoot for the fight against Valdez. The question I have is how reticent, how is the WBO, are they adamant in terms of the mandatory obligations? Will they dare to strip Herring if he decides to go for that match? It's a wait and see. But this is business. This is professional boxing, and you do want to make money here. And given Herring at this stage of his career, at his age, it would make sense that he would try to go for the unification bout with Valdez. One more fight on this card, and I'm going to lean on you, Gail and Daniel. I wasn't able to see this fight in total because I was covering some other stuff, and plus I had to work. The return of Daniela Nietes, over 2-year hiatus. Last time we saw him was in December 2018, New Year's Eve 2018, as a matter of fact. He defeated Kazuto Ioka, who, as we know, had a tremendous 2020, right? Defending the WBO junior bantamweight title. Nietes beat Ioka for that vacant belt back in 2018. He gave that belt up in February 2019. He didn't want to make his mandatory defense against Aston Pelete, who had fought before. Didn't want to fight him again. And his reasoning for that, he didn't want to face another Filipino. Okay, bet. Had been out the ring. October last year, he signed with MTK Global. Announcement that he was coming back. He fought on the undercard. He scored a win. I'm going to get your assessment from you, Gail and Daniel. How did he look?
Considering two things, that Nietes is 38 years old, that he's been out of the ring 2 years, he looked sensational, solid, unflappable, didn't seem to lose a step or a punch. He was busy. It wasn't a fight with a lot of highs and lows, highlight real moments, but he was in command from start to finish, looked terrific, never stepped off the gas, looked like he could have gone a full 12. He's in great shape. He's certainly a player in what's become the sweepstakes, especially at 115, if he can get there. It was a wonderful return, very quiet, under the radar sort of return, which is interesting. But those in the know have kept their eye on Nietes. He's really I think an underrated talent. He's always been overshadowed by his flashier countrymen, especially Manny Pacquiao. But he's got it in him, I think, to make one really last good run. And this was a great start.
I unfortunately did miss the fight, but from the highlights that I've seen, Nietes did a good job. It just wasn't flashy, but at this point, like you mentioned, he's 38 years old. He's not going to be too flashy. And like I said, he's in a division where all the major players are already pretty much dancing with each other. It did the job of putting him on the table, but it may not probably be enough to, let's say, rock the boat as far as what matchups we can see.
Well, certainly he's outside the big four. And we've got another fighter on the docket for this weekend schedule who's also just outside the top four. But you never know who's going to become ill. COVID's still out there. You never know at this point of their careers who could be injured and be out of the running for whatever reason. So those guys like Nietes and Jerwin Ancajas are right there as understudies, ready to go. I'm sure either one of them would be very smart to step in, so they better stay in the gym, stay ready. You know, we could get another Angel Fierro situation. They end up filling in on a week's notice and, you know, with nothing to lose, it could happen. So hope those guys will stay sharp and keep that division interesting and popping.
Let's move from Macau over to I had the opportunity to cover this fight for 3kingsboxing.com. Three Kings Boxing. Please go to 3kingsboxing.com. I am a senior writer for 3kingsboxing.com. Shout out to my fellows over there. 2K, the man behind 3 Kings Boxing, Bo, head of media relations, Bakari, lead journalist, Big Cool and myself, senior writers, Red, the editor over 3 Kings. MJ Akhmadaliev, first defense of the IBF WBA 122-pound belts. He defended the title against IBF mandatory Asawa of Japan. Asawa himself, a former IBF champion. And I'll go to you, Daniel. I have to say, controversial ending aside, MJ Akhmadaliev won by 5th round stoppage. I felt the stoppage was early, in my opinion, but up until the end, to me, MJ, he looked terrific. The speed, the way he darts in and out at an angle, even though he's only had 9 fights, because of his amateur pedigree, there's an experience there that belies his record, right?
Yep.
I'm watching him, and I'm like, okay, one, I think he's the best. He's the best at 122 pounds right now. 2, based on what I've seen in that fight against Iwasa, he's one of the few fighters from 115 to 122 who can give Inoue a fight.
Right now, yeah. And this is a similar situation. Not as pronounced and not as celebrated, but this is a similar situation to Loma. We know how Loma came in with that amateur pedigree.
Excuse me, Daniel. I said Iwasa. I want to make that correction, but it's Iwasa.
Yes. Iwasa, no problem. Yeah, but like I was saying, like this is a similar situation to Lomachenko in a way where, yeah, the record's not there professionally, but there's a dearth of amateur experience that backs up that performance. Now, yeah, the stoppage was, you can say, a bit premature. It's probably one of the worst stoppages you can see in the month, but it probably pre-tell what was going to happen in the fight, unfortunately. Too many in and out shots, too many combinations, and the speed. If anything, if you can give anything to the referee, it's just the speed of the punches that came in right around the stoppage. Now, Asawa didn't do much at that point to put up his hands and defend himself, which unfortunately we have to go to the edge. We have to protect yourself at all times. So that might have helped a little bit in the stoppage, but it doesn't change the fact that the right man won, and that's going to be an interesting tell if Inoue decides at some point to go up to 122. We know, like I said, there's not a lot of time left. It's staying at probably at 118 with some of the players that are out there. And going down to 115 doesn't seem to be an option now with those 4 guys waiting for him. So it's going to be an interesting tell. Yep. But unfortunately, people are going to remember the stoppage, and that's the bad part of it.
Am I giving too much praise to MJ in the aftermath of this fight. Your impressions in terms of his performance against Iwasa, Gail?
It was a premature stoppage. It really, to cite a cultural reference, Iwasa should have been allowed to continue a few more rounds and allowed him to save some face. Truly, he still had gas left in the tank. Was the outcome in doubt? No, absolutely not. I mean, Akhmadaliev was winning every round. He was in command of the fight. There were times in there he almost looked bored. I mean, he was just skating through the rounds. It was so easy for him. He is truly that talented. I think the problem in assessing him is he is that good. He doesn't always press for a big, flashy knockdown because he's more disciplined than that. He's got more skills on display. Truthfully, his jab is so good. He could snap somebody's head back all day and never put himself in danger. If you are a hit and don't get hit kind of fighter and fan, he's your guy. But he performed so smoothly. Iwasa's was a very creditable opponent, not not a pushover, not a walkover. But he made him look like he'd barely put any rounds in. He truly made him look amateurish, and Iwasa is not that. So where Akhmadaliev goes from here, he's got a challenge on his hands, finding opponents. Some of these guys in the lower weight divisions have to risk either dropping to a division below them or going up where it isn't their sweet spot because they need more of a challenge. And that's where he is, I think. I'd love to see him fight Danny Roman again. Roman is the only one who's really ever given him a solid challenge as a professional. And that might be the best fight out there for him in the division. Otherwise, if Inoue is willing to come up, great. I'm not sure he will, but that's a makeable fight. I really do wonder whether he's capable of dropping, to where there's a little more competition. I think that would be difficult for him. But there are some options on the table for him. He looked good. He impressed. He's an absolute hero in Uzbekistan. All the Uzbek fighters are. It was impressive to see this card from top to bottom in front of a full house, sold-out crowd, party central. Yeah, you had to get up at 7 a.m. on the West Coast to see it. It was worth it. The 3 Uzbek fighters, all of whom train in Southern California with Joel Diaz, we may not know them extremely well in the United States. That's our fault. These guys have millions of followers in Eastern Europe and in their home country. They're all a little bit different personality. Shakram Giasov, who was on the undercard, he's kind of the more fun, happy-go-lucky guy, very engaging. He speaks English the best of the 3. But Akhmadaliev is also a very bright, shiny personality. He doesn't have as much command of the English language, so it can be a little harder to tell. Madrimov actually is the power puncher of the 3, might have the most upside. He's a little more serious. He's a little more menacing, but it makes them all very fun to watch. And they'd be smart to package themselves on cards like they did with this fight on Saturday, even back in the United States, and kind of sell themselves together as a team and as a package deal, because they complement each other real nicely on a full card.
To check out the other fighters that Gail mentioned, Madrimov and Giasov, I'm not going to talk about them here, but you can check out recaps and previews of, not recaps and kind of a profile of those fighters over at Three Kings Boxing. I did the recaps for all 3 of those fights over there. Please go to threekingsboxing.com. And in terms of Akhmadaliev, in spite of my high praise of him coming off of this win, to Gail's point, there is still fights for him at 122 pounds before a proposed fight against Inoue. who's still at 118, who will probably be there at least for a few more fights, right? There's Neary, WBC champion. There's Stephen Fulton, WBO champion, as well as a rematch against Roman. I wouldn't mind a rematch with Roman. I wouldn't mind him fight MJ fighting one of the other champions. I think Neary would be the highest profile fight for him at 122, outside of a rematch with Daniel Roman. But still, good competition for him. It's just that I think that he's, in terms of his in the ring skill, his in the ring personality, and he got a little swag outside the ring too. I think he has the chance to be one of those it guys at at the lower weight divisions, right? And I think he's here to stay. I really do. I think he's here to stay. Big future for MJ Akhmadaliev, and keep your eyes on the folks. If you don't know about him now, please keep your eyes on him. I think he's the goods. He's the goods, in my opinion. Let's move from the fights that took place this past weekend. Go back a couple of weeks, and let's start with the ladies. I'm going back to you, Gail. Amanda Serrano, who's, let's face it, is one of the best fighters, women's fighters in the world. There's no doubt about that, right? But there's criticism and skepticism is too. And there's about this based on the failed negotiations for the fight with Katie Taylor. Many believe that the reason for that the fight not happening has more to do with her and her team rather than Team Katie Taylor. Whatever you want to say about that, she's moved on for now. She has a 126. She fought in her home country of Puerto Rico against a former junior featherweight champion, Daniela Bermudez. And overall, I have to say, it was a Ring City card in San Juan, right? Middle of the week. I believe it was on a Thursday. I have to say, overall, it was a highly entertaining fight. The way that Serrano finished it off in the round 9 with the body shot was beautiful. Ring City continues to put on good cards, and Bermudez, she made Serrano fight. She brought a lot of the best out of her. Overall, I was entertained.
This is one of those women's bouts where you really hope all your friends who've trashed women's professional boxing saying, nah, I don't like it. Nah, isn't it exciting? They don't have any power. They don't have any skill. No, this is the fight they needed to watch. Serrano absolutely dominated the fight, but you're right. Daniela Bermudez, who's very skilled, very experienced, made her work for it, but Serrano did the work. She not only got the stoppage, which is very difficult for women in 2-minute rounds, but she was up at the time of the stoppage in the 9th round, 80-72 on all 3 cards. It was that much of a dominating performance. Bermudez was smart. She knows Serrano has 10 first-round knockouts out of her total knockouts of, by the way, 30 knockouts. Amanda Serrano has a 75% knockout ratio. That is unheard of for women. So she knew that. She knew Serrano would come at her. She was careful. But eventually Serrano just wore her out, came at her. When somebody is that relentless, you mentally just wear out from the need to focus so hard on all of that coming at you. And Serrano stopped her with a left-right combination to the body. When's the last time you saw a woman professional get a body shot knockout stoppage? Very, very impressive. Bermudez definitely came to Puerto Rico for more than a paycheck, but yeah, her skills just could not match up to Serrano. She didn't show any fear of her, but Serrano had the speed and the footwork to back up her power. Bermudez just has some raw power, and occasionally she gets the right opponent and gets a stoppage. And Serrano said after the fight, she knew she could walk her down. She knew that she was bigger than Bermudez and that she had a lot more power and that she was there not just to win, but to put on a show. Very, very smart. And Ring City USA, folks, if you have not caught these midweek cards, which are moving all over the country, you best get these things on your schedule, on your boxing watching schedule, or at least get back and watch the reviews and record these things. The matchmaking has been superb. There have been some surprises. I don't think we've really seen a bad fight on any of the early cards, and that is a credit to the whole Ring City USA approach. It's showbox with a fresh look, with fresh players. A credit to matchmaker Sam Katkowski, who used to run Churchill's boxing gym in Santa Monica in California, previously Wild Card West. You know, he's seen the talent firsthand up close in the gyms in a way a lot of matchmakers don't, and it's paying off. This was a really good headline event for Ring City. On that undercard, I'll just mention quickly, two brothers, twins from Mexico, the Baez brothers. One fights at super bantamweight, one fights at bantamweight. We're on the undercard. That was a fun act. Unfortunately, one of them's going home with a win. The super bantamweight, the bigger of the two, Eduardo. Unfortunately, bantamweight Leonardo had a much tougher challenge, and against a undefeated Puerto Rican opponent. Again, a good fight, but he ended up taking a little too much punishment in his corner, threw in the towel at the fourth round of that fight. But a terrific card. So Ring City, folks, watch your listings. I believe they have a card coming up next week. And one of their upcoming cards is going to take place at the Military Academy at West Point in New York. So another really interesting venue, as well as a good lineup.
Yeah, there's not much to add in that area. Say again?
No, I was going to say shout out to previous guest from a few shows back, Yolanda Cortez. She joined us live on the live YouTube chat. Just want to give a shout out to her. Proceed, Daniel.
Yeah, there's not much to add. And actually, I'm watching the highlights right now because I know it's been a little while back. And you can just tell that Serrano had a more pop than her punches. Bermudez did a good job as far as defending, making sure that she, at least if didn't get like a knockout to the head. But the problem is when you protect too much of the head, you leave the body vulnerable sometimes. And that's what Amanda took over. And you have to give praise to this. I know Ring City has been, some people compared it to ESPN Friday Night Fights. I don't think it's in that level as far as just being prospects. It's probably a reminder that somebody, I forgot who said it, was this is probably the likeliest successor to HBO Boxing After Dark in a way. You know you're going to get good fights. You know the cards right now have compelling matchups. And you're not going to leave mainly disappointed. The only sad part about it is now is pretty soon, because of what NBC Universal has done, you're going to have to go behind a paywall to see these in the future. Because NBCSN, unfortunately, is going away. And like I mentioned, this is going to be coming over to Peacock, the streaming service.
Well, there is some good news. The word on the curb is that these fight cards are going to move over to, wait for it, USA Network, which is also by NBC. Now, isn't that an interesting circle in history to have these fights go back on the USA Network, which would keep them free on a basic cable channel? So stay tuned for that. That could be happening, and that'd be a nice turn of events for them.
Yeah, it will be interesting. It would be fun to see USA back in the boxing games for years,
Thursday
for
night,
decades, really.
Thursday
They used
night
to have the
fights
Tuesday,
again.
right.
Yeah,
They used to have the
it,
Tuesday night fight series for years, 80s, 90s, and the sport went away. And yeah, I would not be upset one bit if Ring City moves over to USA.
it would actually be an interesting lineup because they're already WWE already announced they're moving NXT from Wednesdays to Tuesdays because of this move that USA Network's doing. Because one of the things on Wednesday nights that NBCSN has always done is hockey, and
Right.
the Stanley Cup and the Stanley Cup playoffs are going to be pretty soon around the corner. So USA might actually have a steady like sports or sports entertainment lineup, but you can have Tuesday night NXT, Wednesday night hockey Stanley Cup playoffs, and Ring City on Thursday. That is a mouth-watering lineup if you're a sports fan,
Yeah.
especially with the cards that Ring City's putting out.
And you can just, people are creatures of habit. So you tune in early in the week, you just sort of leave your TV for the night as to what channel you had it on when you shut it off after watching sports. And for 3 nights straight, you just sit there with USA and you're in good shape.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question about Serrano. Look, she's at 126 now. After this fight, after her win against Bermudez, she said she wants to become undisputed at 126. I hear her, but still, I can't give over the fact that the fight against Taylor was not made. I would like to see a second attempt in terms of negotiations there. If not, I would like to see her possibly move back up to 130, where you have a very good division with Terry Harper, with Michaela Mayer, Hamadouche, the Korean champion Choi. You still got Delphine Pearson, right? So there are fights for her there as well. I understand the goal of want to become undisputed at 126, but for me, the bigger fights, the better fights, but the ability to make more money is at 120, 130 with the quartet or quintet, if you will, if you want to include the Pearson. And of course, the big pot of gold that is Katie Taylor at 135. Should Serrano be so constant? Should her concentration be so? Should her focus, excuse me, be so much on becoming undisputed at 126, where there are bigger money opportunities at the higher weights?
I very much, as we were talking about Herring's options, saying that I would always favor unification. I still would favor seeing Serrano unify where she is now. Then she can move up, and she's got a legacy in the bag, and it will serve her well, even if she gets to 130 and it ends up being maybe tougher than she thinks. Serrano has fought down as low as 115. How the hell she made 115? I mean, I'm still in awe of how she did that. And there are a lot of women who would like to know exactly how she did that. She could make herself a lot of money on a program or something. But if she can unify, she can move on to 130, and she's still a lock for the Hall of Fame if she does that. She is, by the way, Serrano, with that last fight, moved into second place on the all-time knockout list for women's professionals. The only person in front of her is Christy Martin with 32. And I'm not sure how many behind she is, Martin. I think just a couple. And Serrano is only 32. So she's got plenty of time to pass up that record. And it'll be exciting to watch her try to do it. I think she will do it. But she's got quite a few years. Women's professionals tend to stick around because they don't get as many fights, and they don't get as many high-level fights, although Serrano will probably be an exception. And they simply don't take the wear and tear as the men. So at 32, if she wants to keep at it, she can easily keep going for 3, 4, 5 years. I'm not real concerned if she delays moving up, especially if she's easily able to drop. Not that she loves it, I'm sure, but if making weight isn't an issue for her right now, stay where you are, unify. She's got plenty of time.
What say you, Daniel?
At a certain point, because of how far she's gone off the spectrum as far as making weight, not going as low as 115, probably going to lightweight in that area, and not to mention when she has to make weight for MMA fights. It's probably a good thing, even though I understand that the big money fight is Katie, and we probably know that there's going to be a lot of personal animosity that has to be put aside in order to make that fight. But it probably makes more sense from a health standpoint to find a way and stay there and try to get more unifications done in that manner. Because not to mention, a few divisions up, we see Clarissa Shields doing it. So there's precedent to do it, but probably from a health standpoint, just because of the way she's fortunately fluctuated so much weight over time, it's probably best to stay in one area, unless the brain struck comes from Eddie and says, "Okay, Katie wants to fight. We're willing to give you this money." That's the only exception, probably.
From the PR, let's move from Puerto Rico to the UK, and the rematch between Alexander Povetkin and Dillian Whyte. They fought in August of last year. Povetkin scoring one of the bigger upsets of the year, knocking Whyte out cold with a single left uppercut in the 5th round. They were going to fight at the end of 2020. They got pushed back because Povetkin tested positive for COVID. They rematched a couple of weeks ago, and I'll go to you, Daniel. Dillian Whyte, he won by 4th round stoppage, but to me, I give Whyte kudos for the win. He did what he had to do. But to our earlier discussion about Herring and the fight against Oquendo and how he was still feeling the effects of coronavirus, I got the impression that Povetkin was not right from jump. He didn't have the legs. I know they said he was recovered, but in the ring, it looked like he was still dealing with the there were still lingering effects of what COVID-19 took out of him, because he didn't have the spark at all.
No, he didn't. His legs were not there at all. You could tell, like even before the fight started, they were not there, and allowed Dillian Whyte to land haymakers from the 1st round and almost got a 1st round knockout out of it. But this, and we mentioned Herring's fights, this could become the case studies for maybe if you do get COVID, if a fighter does get COVID and they're recovering to get back, maybe especially if a big fight, maybe put that aside, maybe try to get a stay busy fight in between, or because we've seen it happen before, maybe try to get a 4 round out of it. Get yourself down where you don't have to stress too much. See how much you have to let go, because if other fighters get COVID and if other fighters start looking like this and their immediate fights coming back, that's going to tell people, hey, maybe, don't put the big fights on. Do something to stay busy. The other parties will probably understand, because as much as we all talked about when we previewed the fight, that Whyte was winning the first fight until Povetkin landed an uppercut. And let's not forget that Whyte actually also said that he thought that Povetkin was faking COVID. But besides all of that, it didn't look right. Like, you don't want to say it's a tainted victory, but in some ways it can be seen as that. Although Dillian Whyte did what he was supposed to do, and that's take up Povetkin. and put himself back, not so much in the driver's seat, but put himself back into the circle where, whether it's Fury, whether it's AJ, whether even if it's Deontay, if the arbitration comes out in Deontay's favor, if it's Deontay, they have to talk to him. He can't be avoided anymore.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'll go to you, Gail. With the win, Whyte basically earned his number one position mandatory, I guess, if you want to call it, status back. He was mandatory. He was mandatory for the WBC belt when Wilder was the champion for 2 years, close to it. It never got the title shot that he wanted. I don't think he's going to get a title shot anytime soon now, given the back and forth negotiations with Fury and Joshua. If you were handling him, what would you do with him?
First thing I'd say to him is, sir, follow the money. Just like with Jamel Herring. At this point of his career, make it about the big paychecks. He's a name on anyone's record. He's a draw, especially in the UK, when audiences are allowed to come back. He's a great fight to make. I do think the Wilder fight makes the most sense, although, Where's Waldo has become Where's Wilder? I mean, what the hell? Where is he? What's going on? Nobody knows. That would have been a great fight to make, but Wilder is really a mystery card at this point. So who else is out there? Well, Joseph Parker is certainly out there. That'd be a fun fight to make with Whyte, even though they've gone around before. That's still doable. I wouldn't mind seeing him against one of the younger guys, if anyone's bold enough to go after him, a Philip Hrgovic and Alec Bebic, who are both big trash talkers. Could be fun. There's still the Joe Joyce Usyk fight. The winner potentially gets Whyte. The other fight I like a lot that I don't think is on the radar for a lot of people is Michael Hunter, who is a legitimate, top 10. He's right down at the very bottom of the top 10, but he is there. That's a makeable fight. But I think Whyte needs to take the fight that makes the most sense from a timing perspective and pays him the best, because he hasn't got access to the very, very top of the division. So he needs to bide his time, find a good paycheck fight, to stay busy. He needs to stay in the ring, both to keep his skills sharp and to make sure his name is in front of the public, and then see where it goes from here. He might get a shot at the winner eventually of a Fury and Joshua series, but they're going to have to play their string out first. So he's got to figure out in the next year until that happens what to do with himself.
One more fight I want to talk about on the docket before we move on to the news. I'll take it solo here. That is Tim Tszyu, son of really one of the better junior welterweights of the past, I would say, 20, 30 years. Costa Tszyu, right? He fought Dennis Hogan over in Australia, won by 5th round KO. It was a case where he got off. Tszyu was just basically too big and too strong for Hogan. He was cut in this fight, Tszyu, and he was a little bit wild early. But once he settled down and he found his patience, he pretty much had his way. He put Hogan down with a nasty little uppercut, counter left uppercut in the 5th round, finished him off later in the round. If you haven't seen Tim Tszyu, just think of Costa Tszyu. If you remember him, Tim Tszyu was just basically him, except he's just taller and weighs more, because he's the spitting image of his dad, looks exactly like him. And interesting side note, Daniel and Gail, he made $1 million for this fight, which speaks to the popularity of the kid over down under, right? And solid win. For those who remember, Hogan is the guy who fought Munguia, I think a couple of years ago, gave Munguia hell. A lot of people felt that Hogan beat Munguia when they fought in Munguia's home country in Mexico. Tim Tszyu, he's ready. He's ready for a title shot. Whether it's Castano or even maybe Charlo, right, at 154. No more messing around with this guy. I think he's ranked number 1 by the BO at 154 pounds. Put him in there right now. Put him in there with Castano. I think that's the guy they're targeting. Anyway, for me, he's world championship ready. So I just wanted to mention that because I believe on the last episode I had said we would touch on that fight a little bit. So there you go, the recap of Tim Tszyu and his fight against Dennis Hogan. Let's move on to some news here. And look, I will admit I never thought this fight would happen, but it looks like negotiations are taking place. And that is Terence Crawford, who's in need of a big fight, Daniel. During our time off, word broke that negotiations are ongoing. We talked about this last month, maybe. I was a little bit hesitant about the fight happening, but it looks like it is close to being finalized, close to being made, and that is a fight between Bud Crawford and Manny Pacquiao. It's being proposed for, I think, either June the 12th or June the 5th. Your reaction to the high probability of this fight happening? Finally.
Well, if it does happen, cue the LeBron meme. It's about damn time. But I don't know if it's a cynic in me, part of me just feels like I've heard this before. Manny was going to make a fight against a young guy, even if it's an exhibition. We've heard with the Ryan Garcia thing, and then things fell through. And then hopefully in this case it doesn't, because Bud needs this fight. Bud needs this fight in order to make sure that not only he stays in that picture in the 1 pound for pound, and it's not a situation where, unfortunately, it's not a title unification, because I think Manny was stripped already of the belt. So it's not a unification situation. It's just mainly what Bob Arum has wanted to do for a while, which what he does is when his old star is starting to fade out a little bit, you fade him to the new guy who's ready, and Bud may be ready to take him out. I know some of the colleagues don't think much of Bud, but it's probably his best shot, and he needs this fight, because unfortunately there's not a lot of options. I know Sean Porter was an option, but as much as action standpoint, that would be an exciting fight. It doesn't bring the asses to the seat the way a Manny fight can. So hopefully things get through. Hopefully we'll hear this happen, and that this one would be a pay-per-view worthy fight. And depending upon the location, we could even see close to capacity crowd fill out, because we know Bob has been eyeing Texas, or at least for a little bit, as far as putting fights back on with crowds. So it could, and we know Jerry. Actually, we don't forget Jerry Jones does like to put fights in AT&T Stadium, and Manny's no stranger to AT&T Stadium. So we might see that pop in again. It would probably be worth it.
What say you, Gail? If this fight happens, where do you think it will happen?
If I am a skeptic, the Ryan Garcia Pacquiao fight was a lock until it wasn't. This fight is a lock until it's not. I mean, we've had a lot of this. Pacquiao frequently is one of those guys who, when you talk to him and you ask him questions, he seems to say yes, and he smiles, and he says yes. And you think he's answering yes to, are you fighting Crawford? When the yes really is, yes, I understand your question. And it's not, yes, it's happening. It's, yes, I understand what you're asking me. We've all run across people like that. Pacquiao is a guy like that. I mean, it's just his nature. And I dare say, as he's been an elected politician in his home country for many years now, it's probably gotten even worse. I am really skeptical that this comes about. And whether the negotiations fuel a more serious discussion, about an opponent for Crawford. Yeah, I get it. Everybody wants him to fight Errol Spence. I mean, I think he's just going to either have to find another dance partner, move up, loosen the purse strings a little bit or in his demands. Who knows? But I'm not sure this ties everything up in a neat little bow like people think. So I am in wait and see mode.
Well, he doesn't have many options. I mean, I don't think it's.
Everybody's got options. Everybody has.
I mean, he's put himself in out. Let me rephrase. He's put himself in a corner, right? Because I don't think Daniel is that people don't think much of Crawford. I think people are disappointed in his rhetoric in regards to a fight against Spence. You don't sit there, bud. And we've talked about this before. You don't sit there and just brush that fight off the shoulder like it's nothing. You don't talk about that fight as it is not significant. No, sir. That's the biggest fight for you. That's the biggest fight for Spence. It's one of the biggest fights in the sport. You just don't let that go. And you had an opportunity to fight Porter. Porter still wants him. And that's a good fight as well. And the Pacquiao fight's being mentioned. And he needs something. He needs something. Will it happen? At this point, I mean, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have said no because I didn't think Pacquiao wanted any of him. But at this point, Bud is the one who needs to fight, not Pacquiao. He needs to do something to Daniel's point. And right now, take it. I mean, if it's out there, you got this sour, dour attitude about Spence, and whoever's fault that is, I'll leave that up to the folks. I think it's a little bit of both. I lean towards Bud's problem with that. Bud has a lot of fault in that, but again, that's subjective, right? He needs something, and if it's Pacquiao, damn it, do it. Damn it, make it happen. So there you go. For me, yeah. If it happens, let's just say fingers crossed. Let's just say fingers crossed that it does happen but Terence Crawford, he needs something big and he needs something big ASAP. Within your discussion about this, you mentioned how Ryan Garcia Pacquiao fight exhibition was it seemed to be set in stone until it wasn't. Well, let's talk about Garcia as well as Devin Haney. I'm going to split this up, and there's an announcement that's supposed to be later on this week, Gil, about Ryan Garcia and his upcoming fight. Let's just spill the beans right now. The word is he's going to fight Javier Fortuna in what is basically an elimination bout this summer. In terms of Devin Haney, he's going to defend the bout against you. That's just rumor for now because not official. We all deal. I'll see an upcoming fight against Javier Fortuna.
This fight was proposed long before any serious talk with Haney. Golden Boy has always been in favor of making this fight. Garcia protested that he didn't want it, that he wanted Haney. I think there was a bit of face saving going on, which has been a reoccurring theme of tonight's show. But now with Haney already having a dance partner, Ryan's got cover to say, okay, Fortuna, all right, okay, I get it, fine. That's a good matchup for him. That's another good get some work in test against a guy whose bona fides are well known to see how he performs. It's a good yardstick among some of the other opponents that Fortuna has faced. And it's, if it's a secret, it's absolutely the worst kept secret in boxing. I mean, everybody's, sort of knows this thing is coming along, and, I'm fine with it. I don't hate it. And likewise, I'm sure we'll talk about the Haney matchup with Jorge Linares, which interestingly enough was one that was proposed for Ryan Garcia, which fell apart. So we've got, it's not a Puerto Rico versus Mexico fight exactly. It's a Dominican fighter versus a Mexican American, very Southern California kid. But, Fortuna's got some names on his resume. Adrian Granados, Robert Easter, Jason Sosa. So this is Brian Vasquez. This is a good fight, actually, for Garcia. It's not the marquee matchup, but it's not the Four Princes matchup, but I'm not sure we're there yet for these four guys, and we've got plenty of time.
Haney Linares, May 29th. Daniel, your thoughts?
If you're not going to fight Ryan, this is a good fight. And this could be a dangerous fight for Haney because we know Linares. He can just show up and be world-class Linares for one night and just wow us away. And Haney, unfortunately, is one of the reasons why I wanted him to have to fight with Garcia rather than this. At this point, if you fight Garcia, if you lose to Garcia, you both are in the same age range where a loss wouldn't hurt you. A loss to Linares might hurt him, which is what makes it a little bit of dangerous in that aspect because we know Linares has been serviceable. He's can be good for at least 6 rounds. He can pretty much, unless he loses gas earlier on, he'll give you at least 6 rounds of top caliber fighting. And it's an interesting test for Haney because it's going to be somebody that's grizzled, former champion, very well experienced, and who is not afraid to bleed. Let's not forget one of the unfortunate constants when it comes to Jorge Linares. Like he can be cut up pretty easily sometimes. So that's going to be a very interesting fight. Hopefully, stays in there. We know the fight's announced, but we know some things can happen. But for both them and for both him and Garcia Fortuna, they're both good fights. They're both going to be things where both of the guys are going to get tested, and they both come out on top, and they both still talking smack. Okay, then now you can go next.
Indeed. So I'm not mad at Fortuna and Ryan. Fortuna, he's still a tough guy. He's tricky southpaw. I think he's going to give Ryan Garcia some problems. By the way, I would pick Ryan to win, but I would not be surprised one bit if Fortuna would score the upset. In terms of Haney Linares, it all depends on what Linares has left. If he still has something left. Put it this way: if he's the fighter that we saw against Loma until Loma took him out, I think he's going to give Devin Haney all kinds of trouble. If he slips since then, I would pick Haney to win and win rather comfortably. I think we all know that Linares doesn't have the greatest chin in the world. Haney is not a puncher, if you will, but he's not a one-punch guy, but he has enough power to hurt a guy. And as Daniel said, Linares is tender skin. I will go with Haney here. We'll talk about it more as the fight comes along, as the fight gets closer. Let's move on to previews here, and I'm going to you, Gail. I get the sense that Joe Smith Jr. is one of your favorite fighters, not just because of how he fights in the ring, but his personality outside of the ring. He fights Maxim Vlasov for the WBO light heavyweight title, the vacant one that Canelo Alvarez gave up. Is this a question of what kind of chin, how good of a chin Vlasov has? Because I've seen him on film, and to me, he's quick, he's athletic, hands and feet, right? He's an adequate boxer. We know that Smith has significantly improved over the past few fights now that he's basically made the sport his sole focus, doesn't have the side hustle. But I think if he doesn't get caught, if he shows that he can take a punch, I think Vlasov can give Smith a very good go of it. I think he
Absolutely.
has a chance to actually outbox him here.
Vlasov is no pushover fight for Joe Smith. Again, another much delayed fight, much to Joe's dismay. Got called off due to a COVID pop a few months back. Joe Smith was hoping to get the fight in and then get married. Well, no fight. And at the time, he was extremely downcast on social media, very upset about it. Well, he did, in fact, go on, have his wedding day. Good for him. He's back. And facing Vlasov, it's a test he has to pass with, he needs to look good. Vlasov could make that tough for him. Vlasov has a lot of experience in the ring. His 3 losses are to very creditable opponents, one of them being Isaac Chilemba, who is well known for making a lot of slick guys look terrible. He avenged that loss. He has an early loss to Gilberto Ramirez. And then his other loss was at cruiserweight. That is not a good weight for him. He is not big enough. But, sometimes you take a fight because you need a fight. And that was against Krzysztof Lobacki. So no shame in that. So coming into this fight, he's a live dog. But if Joe Smith wants to be in the light heavyweight sweepstakes and wants to tee himself up for the fight we all want to see with Artur Beterbiev, he's got to win. He's got to win convincingly. Vlasov's in his way. But you're right, Michael, to point out that it hasn't been that long since Smith was able to train full-time. He was working a full-time union job, and then he'd train. And at this level, I don't care how good you are or, how interesting it is to people to position yourself as this blue-collar fighter. He had to focus, and rightfully so. Never mind the fact, however, that he and his father run a tree trimming arborist business now. So he is occasionally out there supervising guys and occasionally climbing up a tree, which he needs to knock that shit off too. He needs to focus. I think he'll get by this fight just fine. There might be some moments of concern. We'll see. Again, because it's been such an on and off road for him to get there. But I do think he's well prepared, in good position. This could be a fight that actually makes him look very good. If Vlasov stands in there, makes him work for it. Smith frequently fights up to the level of his opponent. So it should be a fun fight to watch. Light heavyweight's a really great stacked division, as we like to say in boxing. A lot of talent. So even a guy like Vlasov below the top level is still plenty competent and plenty dangerous.
Could you see a scenario, Daniel, where Vlasov is basically boxing Smith's shoes off until he gets caught?
Yep. It's probably going to be how, at least probably the first half of the fight's going to go into it, because unfortunately for Joe Smith, he's a puncher. And while he does have some skill, he can be outboxed. And that you add that, like all the turmoil that's happened, like I said, in the delaying of the fight. The good thing is that he got the wedding out of the way, so he doesn't have to worry about that coming back into it. And maybe, like I said, he could take a little bit of a nod from our good friend Kazuto Ioka. How he came back after he got married. It could come in pretty well. And this is a fight that sets up a lot of different things. But I remember when I talked about like the Jamel Herring situation, I mentioned it that you could probably see a Valdez fight on Long Island. Could you imagine? And I got to give a shout out to Jake Donovan, who proposed this from Boxing Scene. A card probably in the Nassau Coliseum. Joe Smith versus Artur Beterbiev. And then Jamel Herring versus Oscar Valdez. 2 Suffolk County, Long Island guys Herring from Quorum, right the town that I live at, and Joe Smith from Mastic, not that far behind. And like that fight would fill if they allowed the capacity, it would fill Nassau Coliseum because they will bring their crews here. That's what Joe Smith has waiting for him. He has to just mainly focus, not let the distractions go into it, and not let Vlasov frustrate him by outboxing him. Because that's unfortunately what happens sometimes when it comes to punchers. If you can outbox him pretty well, they get flustered and they lose confidence in their power. So Joe Smith just has to put his head down, make sure that he closes in the distance, and when he has a chance, throw that right hand because a lot of it is right on the line.
And that fight is going to take place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's going to be on ESPN. Regular ESPN, I believe, is going to air at 10 p.m. Eastern on this coming weekend. Let's move from that fight in Oklahoma to Uncasville, Connecticut. The main event here is a guy we've talked about frequently here on Pound for Pound Boxing Report. That is Jaron Boots Ennis. If Virgil Ortiz if he's not the best young welterweight in the world, then it's Boots Ennis, who undefeated. And I'll go to you, Daniel. You haven't seen many flaws in his game. He oozes talent, special talent. He fights Sergey Lipinets in a 12-round contest, welterweight contest, and Lipinets, he has pedigree. He's a tough guy. On paper, he's the best opponent that Ennis has fought. But could it be a case here that Ennis is just that good, even though he's relatively untested? He's just one of those guys that the ability belies the quote unquote experience or lack thereof experience.
Well, I keep forgetting, is this Lipinets' first or second fight at welterweight?
I can't remember. I want to say second. I could be wrong though.
Because Lipinets, let's not discount him for what he is. He's a skilled fighter. He is a bit more of a puncher, but he does have, let's say, a good skill set. He was a former champion, but he can be outboxed and he can be frustrated. Mikey Garcia showed it, and Boots Ennis does have the skill set to frustrate him. But the problem is, this is going to be his best test. And if Lipinets can bring his power from 140 to welterweight, then it's going to be a good test for Ennis, particularly if he gets caught early in the fight. Because at that point, you need to see whether he can shake it off. Because Lipinets is not going to come barging in and just try to bull rush way to victory. He's smart enough to know where not to get caught with his own shot, but still try to finish the show. So this is going to be a very interesting fight. And hopefully, like I said, Ennis pulls through because we know welterweight is pretty much the PBC playground. But if you can position themselves as far as prospect, and I talked about like prospects fighting with Haney and Garcia, right now with the way things are, I actually wouldn't mind seeing Virgil versus Ennis if neither of them are going to be lined up this year for a world title shot.
No thought, Gil.
We are positioning these two young welterweight talents, Virgil Ortiz Jr. and Boots Ennis, on a collision course. But that's some distance away, I think, in the future. However, because Ortiz Jr. just had such a good performance, I think there'll be some pressure on Ennis, not just to win, but to impress. And he's got a solid test in front of him. Sergey Lipinets, I think will very much be along the lines that you just mentioned being a possibility in the Smith and Vlasov fight. I think Lipinets could win rounds early until he doesn't. He's not got a tremendous amount of power. He's never been stopped. So that would be quite a feather in Ennis's cap if he manages to do it. But I don't think it'll be a one-punch blowout type of stoppage. I think it'll be an attrition stoppage, maybe even something like we saw, not precisely like we saw against between Herring and Frampton, but one of those situations where Lipinets eventually takes so much accumulated damage that his corner throws in a towel in the later rounds when it becomes apparent he's just not going to crawl his way back. I've seen that kind of outcome. Well, Ennis has to be careful, though, is not to put himself at tremendous risk, make a mistake, because he's so driven to impress, and make sure that he gets the same kind of buzzy talk that Ortiz Jr. does. He needs to do what he does best, stay in his lane, continue to win easily, work on his skills. That's going to set him up when he really does end up at a crossroads with a fighter like an Ortiz Jr. down the road. So this is a good test for him, very much as we've seen Ortiz Jr. making his way up in opposition. This is definitely a step up for Ennis. So let's see what he's made of. I think the boxing world is very, very curious to see this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think there'll be a lot of eyes on this fight just to see how good Boots Ennis is, because, as I said earlier, in terms of resume, Lipinets is by far, well, I ain't gonna say by far, but he's the best fighter that Ennis has been in the ring with. On the undercard here, and I'll go for anybody who wants to talk about this fight. Jerwin Ancajas, who's was with Top Rank, kind of moved on to PBC for the moment here. Gonna be fighting a Mexican defending his title against a Mexican by the name of Rodriguez. It's going to be the opening card on this opening bout on this card, which will take place on the 10th. I said at the Mohegan Sun on Showtime, live on Showtime. For those who've seen Jonathan Javier Rodriguez fights, your impression of him? I've only seen highlights. I can't get a read on him. He's 22-1, 16 KOs. He looks like he's solid. He looks like he has power, particularly in the left hook, and he likes to come forward, but he's a little slow of hand and foot. Part of me thinks that will be his downfall. Then again, I think he's strong, and like I said, I think he can crack, and he could be once again, folks, one of these tough Mexican fighters that none of the mainstream folks and a lot of the hardcore heads don't know much about, but he could just come up and surprise. Your thoughts on this fight?
Man, these are dangerous fights. You're absolutely right, Michael. You look at a fighter, you get on BoxRec and you say, he's had all these low-level fights just in Mexico. He's never fought outside of Mexico. Hey, we cannot discount that, because frequently these guys come out of nowhere, Angel Fierro, and they really impress. He could be one of these guys, and especially in the smaller weight divisions, there is loads of talent out there like that who've really sharpened their skills outside of our view. I think this is a bit more of a challenge than Fierro even had with Machado, and Cajas is, the one belt holder at super flyweight he hasn't been busy enough. He's had occasionally a tough time getting fights, so he's a bit under the radar. But he's super talented. It's a good matchup. Could be a really fun fight to watch, depending on whether they decide they're going to bang, and they very well might. I'm not sure that's the smartest thing to do, but when do the fans ever care about two fighters being smart with each other in the ring? It could be the fight of the night, truly.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
let's put it to you this way. We have seen fighters come out of nowhere in Mexico before and surprise us. And it would not surprise me in the least if that's what happens here when it comes to Arkansas, particularly what happens when, granted, we know the little bit of the situation, but when you tend to leave like the place that you were at top rank to go to this other particular place, you may not be comfortable. You know the fighters that they have lined up. That's what kind of happened a little bit with Dogbe and Navarrete, and that's the fight that put Navarrete on the map. So Rodriguez has a chance to put himself on the map against a pretty serviceable champion, and to do so in the division where that's all we're going to talk about. This is a superfly division. This is the division that has the closest thing right now we have to the Four Kings. So, and Jonathan Rodriguez is probably going to have very motivated, and we know Arcanis is going to be motivated to put himself into that picture as well. This could probably be a bomber. It would not surprise me if it winds up being fight of the night.
You know, I can see your point. I can see why you feel that way. So yeah, low key, it could be a very, very good fight, and as you noted, could steal the show. And I think we're going to shut things down and end the show on that note. I wanted to once again thank Yolanda Cortez for checking us out on the show. If you haven't, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button if you like what you heard this evening. And please follow us on iTunes and Spotify and anywhere available where you see Pound for Pound Boxing Report on podcast realm. I'm going to go around the panel here. Begin the show with ladies first. Going to end the show with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News, founder and the lady behind the Falcon Valley Group. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to check you out on a bi-weekly basis on TMZ, let the folks know where they can find you. And free plug for the Falcon Valley Group for folks who don't know what that is.
Thank you very much. Falcon Valley Group is my independent communications consulting firm. You look it up at falconvalleygroup.com. But for the rest, you can catch me on TMZ later this week. I think Wednesday, maybe Thursday. So hopefully there'll be some entertaining celebrities behaving badly that we can talk about later this week. There's never lack of supply where that comes from. But if you tuned in tonight, didn't watch the NCAA final, men's final, you didn't miss a damn thing. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
it was a blowout.
Was going down.
Yeah,
going down.
It was all but none in the first quarter. Congratulations to the Baylor Bears. It's a goner. So you were the smart people listening to Pound for Pound Boxing Report live tonight. That was the right call. And you can find me in my regular boxing column at Communities Digital News. That's COM, COMM, Digi, DIGI News, diginews.com.
And I'll go to you, Daniel, for those who want to, Daniel from the Inscriber, and for Boxing News, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, for those who want to talk wrestling. Or for those who want to check you out, push back against nonsense on Twitter in particular, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yep. You can find me on Twitter, folks, Rox99, RAWKZKZ99. Definitely catch me on there. And finally, everything's starting to get built up, but everything put together so we can start talking about everything that's been happening. And I know I felt the pain in your voice, Gail. I know it had to hurt for the Zags. California is probably hurting right now.
Nah, didn't give a damn. San Diego State was out in the first round, didn't care. And truly, the men's game couldn't hold a candle to the women's final between Stanford and Arizona. I did not have a team in that fight. It was just a joy to watch them come right down to the last few seconds, given their all. So this matchup tonight, they were going to struggle to look half as good, and it didn't happen.
Oh no, yeah,
Yeah,
because as soon as you saw Baylor come out with that lead, that it was over. But that's it.
yeah. It
Definitely catch me on there.
looks like Gonzaga. They used everything they had up in that overtime win against UCLA because they got nothing this evening for Baylor.
And it almost
As
looks like Baylor has 6 guys on the court, up to 5. It's that
yeah, they
dominating. It
just
really is.
yeah, the Bears are just a hungrier and tougher team at this point. Until you, and as you said, Gail, yeah, this doesn't come close to that Stanford Arizona game, or even the Stanford South Carolina semifinal from a couple of nights previous. So yeah, salute to Baylor because it looks like they're going to win it. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk music, fitness, you know what it is with me on Twitter. Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to find out all things regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, the website is the place to go to, p4pboxing.com. If you want to shoot us an email, you can go to p4pboxing at p4pboxing report at p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the website, if you want to scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can check out the top of the page if you want to check out where to follow us on all available RSS feed associated podcast platforms, iTunes, Twitter, iTunes, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and any and everywhere else in between. You can check us out there at the top of the page. At the bottom of the page, you'll find links to where to find us all over social media, where you can donate, as well as my online coaching page. On the next episode, we will do a recap of the fight between Joe Smith and Vlasov. We may talk about F.A. Jabba. He's fighting on the undercard there. We will also do a recap of the fight between Boots Ennis and Sergey Lipinets, the Jerwin and Ancajas fight. We may talk about a pretty good looking prospect by the name of Staniosis. He's fighting Tomas Delorme. And we will do a preview of no, we're not doing a preview of Jake Paul and the Oscar ring because I refuse. We may talk Regis Progress, who's fighting on the undercard against Red Catch. We may talk about that fight, but we will definitely for sure do a preview of Demetrius Andrade, who's returning to the ring to make his mandatory defense against Liam Williams. Tony Harrison, he's making his return to the ring following his loss to Charlo late last year. He's fighting a guy by the name of Perella. So we will talk about all of those fights. Again, want to thank Yolanda Cortez for joining us in the live YouTube chat. For Gail from Communities Digital News and the Falcon Valley Group. From Daniel from the Inscriber and 4 Boxing News podcast. I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 320 of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. We will see you guys. Next time. Everyone have a good evening, good nights, and thoughts and prayers to DMX.
Pull through, big dog. Pull through.
Indeed.